Burkina Faso's military government has said that it has thwarted a coup attempt, and they said it was, quote, major coup attempt, end quote. That tells you that that was a close call. This was not one of those coups that we've covered before, whereas the military or someone tried to do something outside or somewhere far away and they caught them. This sounds like it really came close. Let me show you this clip, we'll come back and discuss.
North Korea's quiet move into Africa, the Burkina Faso gambit. In an era where alliances are shifting and old power structures are being challenged, something unprecedented is unfolding in West Africa, something the world didn't see coming. It's not a diplomatic summit, a peacekeeping operation, or a humanitarian effort. It's 700 fully armed North Korean commandos officially deployed to Burkina Faso, and they're not there to build bridges. They're there to protect one man, President Ibrahim Traoré. It's not just the number or the firepower that's turning heads, it's the very nature of the move. North Korea, one of the most secretive and globally isolated regimes, has sent elite combat troops thousands of miles across the world into the heart of the Sahel. No soft launch, no ambiguity. Both Pyongyang and Ouagadougou confirmed it plainly and unapologetically. This is not routine. In Africa, when foreign troops arrive, they typically wear French insignia or bear NATO credentials. That's been the norm for decades, but this, North Korea establishing a physical security presence on the continent, that's new, and it could be a game changer. To understand how we got here, we have to step back. Burkina Faso has been in a fragile state for years. Military coups, insurgent attacks, and fractured governance have left the country vulnerable to internal rebellion and external interference. Since Traoré took power in 2022, he's walked a fine line, trying to stabilize the country while reducing dependency on Western military alliances, especially those that have long been accused of entrenching rather than solving African problems. But over the past year, that balance became harder to maintain. According to military sources, 2 coup attempts were intercepted within just 6 months. Encrypted communications between rogue soldiers and foreign actors were uncovered. There were even attempts to seize strategic command posts. Each failed plot signaled not just dissent, but determination. Someone, somewhere, wanted Traoré out, not weakened, eliminated. Russia had already entered the picture, filling the vacuum left by France and offering both boots and brains in the form of military advisors and Wagner operatives. But it wasn't enough. The threats were multiplying. The window to act was closing. Traoré and his inner circle needed something more, something off the radar of traditional geopolitics. That's when North Korea answered the call. This wasn't an impulsive or symbolic gesture. It was strategic. It was planned. Sources say back-channel negotiations between Pyongyang and Ouagadougou had been active for months. Simulations had been conducted. Infrastructure quietly prepared. Security clearances issued. The commandos didn't show up overnight, they were expected. So what exactly are they doing there? The mission, insiders say, breaks down into 3 primary objectives. First, to shield Traoré and his transitional government from direct threats, both from within the military and from external forces. Second, to lock down the country's most vital assets: airports, gold mines, government buildings, communications hubs. And third, to train Burkina Faso's elite forces in North Korea's signature tactics: guerrilla defense, internal surveillance, counter-coup operations, and executive protection. This isn't about building a long-term military base, it's about creating an invisible wall around a leader who has become a symbol of African resistance, not just to insurgents, but to foreign meddling. The move raises major questions, not just for Burkina Faso, but for the entire region. Why would North Korea, a country under crippling sanctions and constant Western scrutiny, take such a bold step? Why throw its lot in with a transitional regime thousands of miles from East Asia? The answer may lie in the nature of both governments. Traoré has positioned himself as a fiercely independent figure, anti-imperialist, unyielding to Western pressure, and committed to national sovereignty at any cost. He's expelled French forces, he's pulled out of ECOWAS, he's refused to be a proxy in the geopolitical tug-of-war between global powers, and in that, Pyongyang sees a reflection of its own ideological DNA. For North Korea, this is more than just a security contract, it's an opportunity. Burkina Faso gives them something they haven't had in decades, a live field environment to test their elite units outside the Korean peninsula. It's a chance to collect real-time data, test surveillance tools, and refine asymmetric warfare tactics in unpredictable terrain. The dry bush and urban centres of the Sahel are a far cry from the Korean DMZ, but they offer lessons that no simulation can replicate, and there's something else. Something even more valuable than training: relevance. For years, North Korea has been labelled a pariah state, isolated, unpredictable, and irrelevant outside its nuclear posturing. But each handshake in Ouagadougou, each deployment of encrypted communication systems, each training mission, with Burkina Faso's presidential guard, these are steps toward something bigger: diplomatic legitimacy. Every African soldier who salutes a North Korean officer chips away at the image of Pyongyang as globally isolated. Every government that works with Kim Jong-un's regime, even behind closed doors, helps rewrite that narrative. And what does Burkina Faso gain? Survival. With North Korean specialists embedded in the security apparatus, coup plotters now face a two-layer defense. One shaped by Russian training and battlefield intelligence, the other molded by North Korea's uncompromising playbook. It's not just about defending the president, it's about rewiring the entire security culture. The presence of these forces is already triggering deep internal changes. Sensitive positions are being rotated, disloyal officers reassigned. The presidential guard is undergoing retraining. Intelligence systems are being revamped. And the message is clear: the old way of doing things, dependent, divided, corrupt, is over. This alliance is not without risks. The West will not take kindly to it. There will be consequences: diplomatic, economic, possibly military. But that's the point. This isn't a secret anymore, it's a declaration. Burkina Faso is stepping outside the Western orbit, and North Korea, long shut out of Africa's growing shift away from colonial-era structures, is using the moment to plant its flag. The real question now is whether this is a one-time deal or the beginning of a wider strategy. The presence of North Korean commandos in Burkina Faso is not a political stunt. It's not an act of charity or a desperate deal made in secret. It's something much more calculated and much more ambitious. In military terms, the deployment marks North Korea's first direct combat support role on African soil in decades. But in strategic terms, it's the visible edge of a much larger and well-orchestrated push into Africa. A push that analysts are now calling Pyongyang's Southern Opening Doctrine. For years, North Korea has operated from behind a wall. Sanctions, surveillance, and diplomatic isolation have kept it boxed in. Particularly in the Asia-Pacific theatre, every move was shadowed by US drones, satellites, and military alliances, stretching from Japan to South Korea to the Philippines. That box, however, has limits, and North Korea is looking for the cracks. Africa, fractured, overlooked, and increasingly disillusioned with Western oversight, offers just that. To understand Pyongyang's emerging strategy, we need to connect the dots. Burkina Faso didn't happen in a vacuum. It followed quiet diplomatic re-engagements with Guinea-Bissau and the Central African Republic in 2023. It followed public praise from North Korean state media for Mali and Niger, two countries that had recently expelled French forces and turned toward Russia for security aid, and it followed a string of speeches at the UN, where North Korean diplomats began reaching out to non-aligned African blocs, not with threats, but with offers. Not just military offers either. Security packages, counter-surveillance tools, encrypted communications frameworks, all designed to help fragile governments protect themselves without relying on Western oversight or IMF-backed systems. What Pyongyang is building isn't just influence, it's infrastructure. Infrastructure designed to bypass the typical bottlenecks of foreign aid. Infrastructure built to insulate partners from coup plots, assassination attempts, and digital espionage, the very tactics often employed to destabilize post-colonial states. And what does North Korea get in return? Plenty. Access to Africa's vast untapped reserves: gold, uranium, rare earth metals, agriculture, and more. Diplomatic legitimacy: a growing network of allied states willing to vote with Pyongyang at the UN and against Western pressure campaigns. But perhaps most importantly, freedom to operate physically and digitally in a zone free of American military satellites and Western financial oversight. Burkina Faso, for example, is already being described by some analysts as an untouchable zone, a region where North Korean operatives can test encryption systems, train elite units, and conduct special operations without triggering the full weight of Western intelligence networks. It's a military sandbox, and one with real political stakes and long-term payoff. What Traoré gains is clear. After multiple assassination attempts and failed coups, his regime needs a security apparatus that doesn't just react to threats, but anticipates them. With Russian support, he got boots and drones. With North Korea, he gets something else: internal shielding. The kind of systems built to protect a government from implosion, not just invasion. Sources close to the transitional government confirm that since the North Koreans arrived, Burkina Faso's entire security doctrine has shifted. Positions are no longer just assigned based on loyalty. They're audited, monitored, officers undergo deep counterintelligence checks. Surveillance networks have been decentralized, spread out, to prevent coordinated infiltration. Information flow has been rerouted directly to the presidential command, bypassing bureaucratic red tape that foreign actors once exploited. This is not a duplication of Pyongyang's methods. It's an adaptation. Burkina Faso isn't importing dictatorship, it's importing defense. Defense tailored for a leader targeted not just by insurgents but by international pressure. And Traoré isn't keeping it to himself. Inside the AES, the alliance of Sahel states, talks have already begun to spread this model. Mali, Niger, and even Chad have expressed interest in restructuring their own intelligence networks using the Burkina Faso blueprint. Meetings are happening behind closed doors, technical advisors are moving quietly. A regional shift is underway. It's not about ideology, it's about function. These are countries with limited resources, weak institutional memory, and a long history of foreign interference. For them, a model that offers rapid militarization, deep surveillance, and information control without dependence on European backing is attractive, especially when it comes without lectures, transition timelines, or human rights conditionalities. Western governments are watching this unfold with growing concern, though publicly the response remains muted. Quiet condemnations, vague concerns about sovereignty and transparency, but no concrete moves, no meaningful pushback. Why? Because unlike China's infrastructure projects or Russia's open military aid, North Korea's strategy moves through shadows. It doesn't build skyscrapers, it builds networks, and it doesn't need fanfare. It only needs space and willing partners. The implications, however, are enormous, and if North Korea can embed its systems into even a handful of African states, it gains a multi-regional platform to export its methods and mask its operations. This could mean new proxy relationships, new arms trade routes, new digital black markets that are harder to trace and harder to shut down, and that's exactly the point. This is not Cold War 2.0, it's something different. A shift toward multipolarity where countries like Burkina Faso aren't just being courted by Washington and Moscow, but by Pyongyang, Tehran, even Caracas. It's a world where influence is no longer sold through development loans and embassy receptions, but through encryption protocols, surveillance kits, and elite tactical training. In that world, North Korea is no longer a fringe actor. It becomes a service provider, one with few rules, fewer restrictions, and no moral pretensions. Whether this doctrine succeeds depends on two things: whether Traoré can hold power and whether other African leaders choose the same path. Right now, both are in motion. Traoré has survived more internal threats in the past year than most leaders face in a decade, and his popularity among both the military and sections of the public remains strong. His messaging is clear: Burkina Faso belongs to Burkina Bay, and he's willing to work with anyone who respects that principle. And other African capitals are listening. Mali has already expelled ECOWAS diplomats. Niger is drafting legislation to block IMF influence in its budget planning. Guinea and Sudan are holding talks on building joint counterintelligence platforms. The message is spreading. Maybe the West isn't the only option. Maybe survival doesn't require compromise. The Burkina Faso blueprint, Africa's quiet revolt, and the birth of a new global axis. What began as a defensive move in one West African country is now rippling across the continent. The arrival of 700 North Korean commandos in Burkina Faso wasn't just about shoring up security for President Ibrahim Traoré. It was about rewriting the script, the one where Africa always waits, asks, and compromises. That script is being thrown out. What's replacing it is something the world has never quite seen before: an alliance of states tired of being told how to govern, who to trust, and what stability is supposed to look like. They're no longer asking for permission. They're not even asking for help. They're building a new doctrine, forged not in think tanks or embassies, but in the crucible of betrayal, bloodshed, and strategic awakening. Burkina Faso has become the prototype. It's not perfect, it's still fragile, but it's doing something no African country has done in a generation. It has completely restructured its internal defense system without Western oversight. That alone makes it a target and a beacon. Inside Ouagadougou, sources close to the presidency describe a country undergoing radical transformation. The old intelligence networks, once porous, politicized, and deeply compromised, are being dismantled. New ones built in partnership with North Korean trainers and Russian advisors are rising in their place. Field operatives now report directly through encrypted channels to the presidential office. Loyalty checks are routine. Officer reshuffles are surgical. Every leak is a threat, every unchecked connection a liability. Across key provinces, shadow security units have been established, embedded directly within regional forces, bypassing traditional command structures. Their orders come not from generals, but from encrypted instructions fed through decentralized intelligence hubs. Their role is simple: monitor, report, and neutralize before trouble has a chance to organize. It's not democracy. It's not dictatorship either. It's something new, a model of self-defense born out of desperation and refined through external expertise. This structure is now quietly being exported. In Mali, the government has reportedly integrated similar loyalty systems within its army ranks, modelled off the North Korean approach. In Niger, encrypted radio frequencies now run through Chinese-made hardware, while intelligence officers have begun exchanging data formats compatible with those used in Ouagadougou. In Guinea and Chad, junior ministers are openly discussing transition frameworks that reject external audits or ECOWAS mediation. The African geopolitical map is changing, not with fire and flags, but with infrastructure, training camps, encrypted laptops, and untraceable trade corridors. And who's behind it? Not the usual suspects. Not France, not the United Nations, not even China, which is taking a more cautious, economic-first approach. No, it's Russia and North Korea. Russia brings firepower, long-range strategy, and UN veto protection. North Korea brings systems, the blueprints for how to control, centralize, and protect power under siege. And together they're forming a new kind of axis, not built on ideology, but on survival and mutual leverage. For the West, this is more than a diplomatic headache, it's a foundational threat. The very principles that underpinned decades of Western involvement in Africa, aid for access, democracy for debt relief, military training for diplomatic loyalty, are collapsing, and nothing is rushing in to replace them from Washington or Brussels. Instead, nations that were once divided by colonial borders and economic dependencies are beginning to connect, not because of shared ethnicity, language, or religion, but because of shared disillusionment. They're uniting around one thing: the belief that Africa can no longer wait for respect, safety, or independence from the West. It has to build it, with whoever is willing to help, no matter how controversial that help may be, and the help is arriving. Weapons, surveillance gear, cybersecurity tools, elite guard training, all delivered without the strings of transition plans, election observers, or IMF audits. It's not altruism, no one is pretending it is, but it's clear, it's fast, and in a continent where instability spreads faster than reform, clarity and speed are currencies of power. Western leaders have responded mostly with silence and occasional warnings, but even those warnings are losing their edge. Threats of sanctions? North Korea's already sanctioned. Condemnations at the UN? Russia blocks them. Accusations of authoritarianism. That ship sailed when Western-backed governments fell to coups one after another without a plan in place to stop the spiral. So what comes next? That depends on whether the Burkina Faso model survives the next 12 months. If it does, if Traoré holds power, if the restructuring holds firm, if the threats are kept at bay, then we will likely see a wave of replication. Not carbon copies, but local versions. Versions built on internal control, external partnerships, and a deliberate rejection of dependency. This axis, small as it seems, is not built to topple the West, but it is built to outlast it, to outlast the lectures, the conditions, the cycles of aid and disappointment. It is built to prove that there's another way to govern, one that may be harsh but is not beholden, one that trades glamour for grit. And that shift matters, because it means the West is no longer losing Africa at the ballot box or the trading table. It's losing it at the level of imagination. A new generation of leaders is no longer picturing themselves in suits, shaking hands in Paris or DC. They're imagining encrypted channels, paramilitary drills, and loyalty-driven statecraft, the kind that promises not global applause, but personal survival. And for nations like Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Guinea, that's the prize they've been denied for too long. Whether this new system is sustainable, or whether it will eventually collapse under its own secrecy and force, remains to be seen. But one thing is clear: Africa is no longer waiting for rescue. It's not asking for permission. And for the first time in decades, the powers that once assumed they'd always have a seat at the table are being left outside the room. What do you think? Is this the beginning of something bigger, or just a temporary shake-up? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you found this story eye-opening, support the work by liking the video, sharing it, and most importantly, subscribing to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. We're just getting started.